For many Americans, those government stimulus checks that were promised are going to cover some of their basic necessities. We're talking about food, maybe rent, but for some people, that money's never going to enter their bank account. Here's why. Under the CARES Act, banks and debt collectors are authorized to seize these relief payments if if the recipients have outstanding debt. So for more on this, let's bring in Irina Ivanova, who has been following the story. She's a reporter and video producer for CBS MoneyWatch. Okay, so explain this to us. Is it a specific type of debt that they can take the money? When I read this, I thought, well, you know, a lot of times when you owe child support payments and you get paid, the money gets taken out before you even see it. Is it a situation like that?
That's a great question, Anne-Marie. So yes, child support is one of the types of debts that your stimulus check can be diverted to. But what I found researching the stories is actually a lot of different debts. Even if you owe an old medical bill, for instance, or if there's an old parking ticket, any sort of debt that has gone to collection, that there's a judgment against you, if your bank account has been seized, in theory, your stimulus check could go to pay off that debt.
So, Irina, how are debt collectors actually getting the money from the stimulus checks? How are they getting the money before it hits people's accounts? Or is it after they've hit people's accounts that they're able to access it?
Right. So this is a problem for people who are getting their stimulus direct deposited into their accounts. And what happens is if that account has been seized or is frozen or there's some sort of judgment against it, you could not ever see that stimulus check, or you could see it, you could see $1,200 deposited and $800 taken out, for instance. And then if you have a bank account where you owe money, which is also very common, you could have some overdraft fees, you could have late fees, your bank can also just take that money directly out of the stimulus check.
So in your piece, you also write that often people don't even realize that they owe this debt. Can you tell me whether or not, there's any sort of legal recourse? Often you hear people say, I didn't even know there was this credit card debt out there or this hospital debt out there. And by that time, the money's already gone.
That's right. A lot of us think of debt as something that only happens if you've done, if you've really screwed up financially. And it's actually an extremely common issue. A couple of years ago, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau did a study, and they found that the #1 consumer complaint was debt, either people getting calls from debt collectors or having a debt collected against them. Something like 1/3 of consumers, that's 70 million Americans, have this complaint. And so in theory, as you noted, there is a process that needs to happen for someone to collect a debt against you. They need to go to court. They need to get a judgment against you. But as we've seen, people move. Papers get sent to the wrong address. A lot of people say that people are trying to collect debts against them that they don't even owe. And so what often happens is a person might not even realize that they owe money until they get a check that they were expecting, like a tax refund or their paycheck, and they find that part of it is missing because that's gone to collect a debt.
Irina, several consumer advocacy groups are calling for a moratorium on all private debt collection throughout the duration of the pandemic, but have state and government leaders taken any action on this?
So this is something that's been getting a lot of attention lately. Senators have written to the Treasury asking for a fix, and a lot of states are taking individual actions. So for instance, Massachusetts and Ohio have said that they're going to treat these checks as public benefits and not collect debts against them. Other states, for instance, New York State has said it will not collect any public debt. So if you have a student debt that's been turned over to the state for collection, they're not going to collect that. And actually, the National Consumer Law Center is a great resource. They keep a running list of what states have done what. The problem is these are all very piecemeal solutions. So, for instance, the city of Chicago is not collecting on old parking tickets, but if you owe an old medical debt, which is a private debt, that might not necessarily apply. And that's why a lot of consumer protection groups have come out and have called for a broad debt debt moratorium on all private debts. They're not even necessarily calling for debt forgiveness. They're just saying during this economic crisis, when a lot of people are struggling economically, let's pause on debt collection. Let's make sure that people who get these stimulus checks actually get them, use them on groceries, use them on rent, use them to stay afloat until this crisis passes.
So let me ask you, Irina, one last question, I guess. Sorry, Emery.
That's okay. I think I was going to ask one last question as well about just what action people can take if they're worried about losing that stimulus check because of the debt.
That's a great question. Something that consumer groups recommend is if you can get on the phone with the IRS, if you have not received your check yet, ask them to send it as a check, not to deposit it to your bank account. If you get it as a paper check, get it cashed instead of depositing it into a bank account where it can be seized, and that way you have a little bit more protection. If you've already had your stimulus check garnished or had some debts taken out of it, you could reach out to consumer protection groups like Legal Aid to see if they can help you out and get some of that money back.
All right, Irina Ivanova, thank you very much for your reporting. We appreciate it. Really interesting.
Thank you guys for having me.